Hi, this is Jade with trans-coding.com. On today's episode, we're going to kind of work with uploading our site to the web and making sure that it's accessible by anyone. So we want to go ahead and work on getting ourselves organized. And then we're going to look at the ways that we set up the transfer of those websites. And so let's go ahead and get started. So one of the tools that I really like to use is called GitKraken. So this is going to allow us to manage the Git repo that we had prior. And you can get a free download from GitKraken.com. And it also gives us access to the boards for free. You'll see here it says this is a Kanban style task tracking. What that basically means is you can set up yourself some task lists so you can define what you want to do next. And then you can define those tasks in a pipeline. And so I'll show you how we're going to go ahead and do that. Once you do have GitKraken, you will be able to log in with your GitHub account, and that's going to be through whatever your email you signed up with. Once you have set that up, you can go into the preferences and check out the options there. You'll see an auto fetch interval has been saved by default, and there's a bunch of other configuration options here. I'm only going to use the free version so that we can keep things as low cost as possible. So let's take a look at the next area. The profile is the auto picture that's given to you. You can, of course, edit that, give it a different name, give it a different picture or icon, and you can adjust your email as necessary. Authentication is where things really matter. Here you'll see you've got your SSH keys, which we built before with our Apache account. It should have auto-located those. If it did not, you can browse to find those. And if you did not create those previously, you can use Generate to auto-create them for you. You'll notice that I've already connected to github.com, and that's going to use the SSH key that was provided previously. Once that's set up, you can see that the branching structure for everything that I've done in the process is now here. So you can see the push for a README file, a file replacement that was done, the episode upload for the last episode is here, and so on. But what I really want to focus on right now is the boards area here up top. So if I click on that, it's going to show us options here for opening existing boards, creating a starter, and creating an empty board. I'm going to go ahead and choose the Create a Starter board to get us started. And you'll see this is just a really good basic setup for things to do, things that are in progress, and things that are done. And we can, of course, add columns if we would like to here. Like I might want to add a test column. And we can move that column as well back to where it needs to be. So now we have to do, in progress, testing, and done. And then we can go ahead and add on a couple of different things that we might want to do. For instance, we want to get GitHub I/O set up. I might also add an AWS setup, and this is going to allow us to use non-static web pages, and I'll explain those shortly. Part of setting up GitHub.io is that we're going to have to convert our pages from PHP to HTML, because GitHub does not allow us to use server-delivered information, so we can only use static information. So that means that we're going to need to convert some of our work to HTML if we want to use GitHub.io as our web page of choice. And let me go ahead and move that up so that I've got them in the correct order. So I think that's enough tasks for today. So let's go ahead and work on converting our PHP to HTML. So I'm going to move that to in progress, and that lets me know exactly what I'm working on right now and all of the things that I need to do coming up. So here in Sublime Text, I'm going to go ahead and open a folder, and this is the folder that we've been working with. This is data. And once we've got data open, I'm going to go to htdocs, which is where we've got all of our documents at, and then public HTML, and I'm going to open our index.php. Now, GitHub.io isn't going to allow us to actually view PHP pages, so we're going to have to do a conversion to HTML on our index and any other pages that we want to be viewed. Now, you'll note that even though this is a PHP document, if you'll remember, we're not actually using any PHP tags in here. And you would note that by the actual PHP tag, which is generally going to be an opening caret, a question mark, PHP, and then the closing question mark and caret. Since we're not using any of that for server-side implementation so far, we can convert all of the PHP references in our file to HTML, and then we can save this file as HTML, and it shouldn't have any effect on our page itself. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Prior to saving that file, we're going to need to set up our Pages account for GitHub, and that's going to be at something.github.io. And so, as you can see, if we go to pages.github.com, we're going to choose user or organization site. I've set up this ahead of time, so you can follow along with the simple instructions, but you basically need to create a repository, which is going to be based off of your repository name and your ownership. So the same name as the owner is going to be the same as the repository name. Make sure that they are identical. Then you can use your Git terminal to upload, and then you would just copy and paste each of these lines in to push to the github.io page. Once you have that up and running, from your main GitHub page, you can go to your repositories, and you'll see that that repository has been built for you, and it'll have a README with whatever you set for your initial commit and the README that was set in there. So you can see I've set mine to say front-facing site for public viewing, and you'll note in here that based off of the page that we set up, we have cloned everything in here. And you can see that this is one level down from the page, the public HTML. So this was a clone of the data folder. And so we're going to need to save index.html into the folder of data just before public HTML. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. So here at data, before we get to the htdocs folder, I'm going to go ahead and save that as HTML. Now with everything saved, we can go back to our GitKraken, and you'll note that we now have files that we're managing that need to be uploaded. So we're going to go ahead and stage those, give a quick summary. And then we can go ahead and commit that. We'll do a push from here. So that's successfully pushed, and now we should be able to go to our actual page. And you'll note that now when I go to trans-coding.github.io, our page is here and available. You'll note that even though we've switched up the index page, I can't go to my resume yet, and that's because the resume is still a PHP page. So I'm going to go ahead back to our Sublime, and I'm going to go to our resume page, and I'm going to go ahead and look at all of the references in here for PHP. It looks like we've only got one. And then, as before, I'm going to save that as an HTML file. And you can see in GitHub here that things have changed. Now, when I changed the PHP file, it did save the PHP file as well automatically. I don't want it to do that, so I'm going to discard the changes on our PHP file. And it looks like our index.php was saved with those changes as well, so I'm going to go ahead back and make sure that those HTML pages are still PHP pages. One other thing to note, our index page is no longer going to be in the public HTML file folder, and so we're just going to switch that to a standard slash, and that just tells us to start at the base file. I can stage all of those changes. Alright, while that data refreshes on GitHub, you can see that the upload hasn't quite gone through on my system, but the latest typo fix has. So 6 minutes versus 37 minutes. Sometimes it does take a little while for the upload to occur to the front-facing sites, and that's okay. In the meantime, let's go back to our board and see what we've got. So convert PHP to HTML, that's done. We'll still want to make sure that that works once it's uploaded. We have set up and processed the github.io, and now I'm going to go ahead and do a setup for AWS. So this may be a little bit more involved. The reason I want to set up AWS is because we previously set up our pork bun account, and because GitHub is not able to use dynamic pages that are loaded from a server, I do want to make sure that I can run full PHP, which means that I'm going to need a website that allows me to do so. And the way to do that is to build my own Apache server. So I'm going to use AWS to build that, and Porkbun, the domain that we already have, is what I'm going to use to host that, or to push through. So I'm going to head over to aws.amazon.com, and once here there's an option to create a free account. I'll go ahead and do that. Alright, once we've signed up for AWS, you will need a credit card and a phone number for that, just to be aware. We can head into the Cost Explorer. We are on a free account, but there are things that may incur a charge. One of those will be forwarding. You can enable the Cost Explorer, and that would help you reduce any costs that you might have based on what types of servers and things that you're using. And you've got your bills and your billing preferences here as well. For us, we want to set up a place to actually run our website from with an Apache server. For us, that's going to be EC2 for compute. Once we're here, we're going to go ahead and create an instance. There are a lot of options here on Amazon that you can use. There are 38 different instances. Make sure that you click the free tier only so that you don't get something that you don't want. And the closest thing to the setup that we already built on the Apache system on our own system is going to be the Amazon Linux 2 AMI, which is the first one here. Alright, and in the instance type area here, you can see that there's only one that is free tier eligible, so we're going to go ahead and go with that. I'm going to leave the basic configuration up, and there's no need to change anything there. You can see that our storage starts out with 8 gigs possible, but you can get up to 30 gigs. Our site's not going to be that large, so I'm just going to leave it at the default for now. We can always add to it later. And if you want, you can also encrypt your data. There's no reason for me to do so on this server. We're not going to be storing anything that's important for that. Currently, there's no need to add tags. We're not going to be linking to anything specific right now. Now here in security groups, we do want to make sure that SSH is configured here. The port of 22 is fine. In addition to that, we may want to add an HTTP configuration for that. And that will allow us to have secured as well as unsecured connections to our site. We'll start out with it unsecured, but we will eventually move to a secured version of the site. Once we're done with that, we can go to Review and Launch. And part of accessing your server is going to need a public and a private key. And so give that key a name, create a new pair, and then you can launch your instance. Once that has launched, you'll see the status here. Your instance is now launching. You can get notified of estimated charges. And then we can go ahead and go back to our instances to view it. So you can see here that our instance is running, but it is still initializing currently. So we're going to need to wait for it to come up before we can move on to the next step. Down in the bottom pane for our instance, you can see all of the information that is bound to this instance. You can create status alarms on it as well. Monitoring will let you see how your network is performing. That's going to be input, output, disk writes, etc. And for the additional tags, you can always edit those later. For the name on the instance, I'm going to go ahead and edit that so I know what this instance is referring to, and that is to our pork bun set. And once everything is started up on this, you can select it and then click Connect. This will give you all of the information that you need to connect to the instance, and you would just do that through a Git client or anything else. So you could do that through console or the Git bash. Alright, that concludes everything that we needed to do for this episode. Going back to our board, you can see the AWS setup has been done. So next time on AWS, we're going to have to configure Apache, and then we can set up port forwarding to Portbun. Finally, we're going to want to use our GitHub account, and we're going to have it forward as well. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time. This has been Jade with trans-coding.com.